Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And I'm super excited to have another guest with me here today. We have Helen Percival joining us, and she's going to be sharing all her insights from the world of acting, broadcast journalism, and everything you need to know about voice, body, and breath to help you with speaking well. So very warm welcome, Helen. Fantastic to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So I wanted to start today just with a question about what you see as the biggest challenges people have with speaking well.
That's a great question to start with. The first thing that comes to mind, and I think the main thing, is managing nerves, because public speaking is something that doesn't come naturally to most of us. And even those that do feel comfortable doing it, before you're about to speak or the lights come on or you're about to walk on stage, the adrenaline kicks in and the nerves kick in. So personally, I feel like the best thing that you can do is learn ways to manage your nerves and any anxiety that might come along with it. Because if you're in a calm space, then you're going to communicate better anyway. And yes, so that would be the thing, my main priority, I think, when it comes to public speaking.
And I'm sure lots and lots of people recognize that, right? In terms of nerves, it can be about the audience, how large it is, or the group of people that makes people feel nervous. It could be about the topic that we're talking about. So what sort of ideas and tips do you have to help people in that space?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that you can do. Obviously, preparation is key. Preparation's everything. So the more familiar you are with the content of what you're going to be talking about, perhaps you're having to riff from memory, or perhaps you'll have note cards, but being really on top of the material and the content that you're going to talk about, that in itself will make you feel so much calmer and confident. And knowing the context in which you're going to speak, how many people are you speaking to, what's the audience dynamic going to be, all of these things that will just help you feel much calmer and more in control in a situation that can sometimes feel quite uncontrollable, is really important. So I think those two key elements. And then and this is where a lot of the work that I do comes in terms of understanding your body and your breath and your voice, and how these elements can really support you when you're speaking in public, particularly the breath. If you're able to manage your breath well, then the rest should hopefully flow nicely, because that's the sort of the underpinning of everything. So I would say being able to manage your breath and you utilize it to your advantage to help keep you in a nice, calm, present state.
That's fantastic. And I certainly can imagine that lots of listeners are thinking, yeah, I can understand that preparing content is important, understanding where you're presenting, who you're presenting to. But breath might be something that sometimes people haven't thought about previously. So why is breath so important?
Well, it keeps us alive. That's
that is important.
That's pretty critical in these situations. But because we can use the breath and the way that we breathe to help regulate the way that we feel and keep ourselves calm. So I have trained as an actor, and a lot of the training that we do is dedicated to body, breath, and voice work. And ahead of most shows or performances, actors warm up. They spend, obviously there's variations, but you would spend half an hour warming up your body, your breath, and your voice before you perform in public. And though public speaking isn't acting, it's still, you are performing in a sense. So the breath is critical because we can use it. There are different exercises that we can do to help calm ourselves, regulate ourselves. We also, we learn a lot about how to breathe, and actually to breathe in the diaphragm area. So you want to have actually quite nice deep breaths where possible. When we get nervous, when we get a bit anxious, our breath can get quite shallow. So we start to sort of up in the chest area, and that impacts everything. So when I'm breathing like this, and you can hear it in my voice, everything sounds just more constricted and tighter. And that's not nice for the listener or whoever that you're speaking to, because they will pick up on that sense of anxiety. So how to have nice deep breaths, which supports everything. And we do exercises. Perhaps some of your listeners are familiar with meditation and yoga. So I share those kind of exercises to help people feel more at ease. And these are little tips and tricks that you can do, and people don't even know that you're doing them. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's what we like to share, to empower people to be able to manage their state. That's what it's so much about.
That is fascinating, about managing state. And I, even just then, when you gave the example of how your voice sounded when you were breathing in a shallow way compared to when you were breathing more deeply, that was really obvious. But this idea of warming up, I think, again, that's probably something quite new that many people don't think about. They're probably looking through their notes just before they're speaking or running through it in their head, but not paying attention to that. So let's imagine a scenario. Let's imagine it's me and I'm about to go on stage and speak and give a speech somewhere. What should I be doing if I'm literally, maybe on the side waiting to go on in those kind of last 5-10 minutes with my breath? Have you got an example of something I could do?
Absolutely. And so, for example, if you find that your state, you are feeling quite nervous and quite anxious, I would recommend a very simple exercise whereby you just breathe in for a count of 4 and breathe in through the nose, and then you breathe out through the nose for a count of 6. So basically the exhale is longer than the inhale. And I would do maybe 8 repetitions of this. So quite slowly. In fact, why don't we let's do 2, we'll do 2 rounds of this. And if your listeners want to join in, they can as well.
Fantastic. I love it.
Okay, in fact, I'll talk you through it. So perhaps if that's all right, Victoria, you could do it.
Yes, I will do. Yep.
Okay, so in through the nose and out through the nose. And so if you just exhale all the air out for the moment, so exhale, and then you're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we would just keep repeating that, perhaps for 8 rounds, or as long as you want to, really. But it's a great. How do you feel, by the way?
That feels really good, actually. I was going to say it feels very calm. And it's also, what I noticed is it's quite a subtle way to do this, right? I could be sitting in the audience, even waiting to go on stage or waiting to do something. And I could do that. And because it's through my nose, breathing through my nose, it's not obvious. That's fantastic. I love that. That's a very simple exercise. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed that. So tell me, I mean, this is really interesting. People are obviously used to this idea of warming up their body for exercise, but then warming up your body for public speaking, that's something that's perhaps a new concept for many people listening. So what's that all about then?
It's really interesting because having worked as an actor and done lots of training in acting, it's just sort of second nature for me to, of course, we have to warm up our bodies before performing. And public speaking is a performance of sorts. It's a way to, how can I say this? I think in society generally, we're encouraged to be very disconnected from our bodies. Yes, you go to the gym and you work out, and that's what you do to your body. Your body's like a tool, basically. And yet it's this incredible instrument that's communicating with you all the time. But we need to learn how to listen to our bodies and how to use them effectively. And so that's why we warm up, because the, you know, talking of managing nerves, we get butterflies in our tummy before we're about to speak in public. And it doesn't matter how much training you've got or whether you're a professional actor, you still nerves, and you want nerves as well. That's the other thing that's important to say, actually. It's not about being in this sort of super calm Zen state. Their nerves are there for a reason, to just give you a bit of an edge. But it's making sure that you feel in control so that they don't tip you over into an unhelpful space. And that's where warming up the body is so helpful, because we hold a lot of tension, there's stress, there's anxiety. So to be able to just dissipate a bit of that. So in answer to your question about you're about to go on stage, you've got 10 minutes, 5 minutes, what should you do with the body? I would, if you can, maybe perhaps walk around a little bit, just pace a little bit. A few shoulder rolls are really helpful. You can shake the arms. One of my favorite things is what we call a spinal roll down. So you're standing with your feet about hip width apart, and you've got your knees slightly bent. Obviously, work within the limitations of your own body. If you know that you've had injuries, take all of that into account. And it's very simple. All you do is put your chin on your chest, and then you roll the whole way down. So you end up almost with your hands on the floor. This is called a spinal roll down. Actors do it all the time before a performance, not in life generally. And this is a wonderful exercise to just get things centered and in alignment. And again, I would probably do that twice, maybe 3 times. And this is all ways of getting out of our heads as well and into our bodies, which again will make you feel calmer and more grounded. This comes back to that original point of how to manage nerves. It's really important to feel grounded and centered, and the body is an amazing way. In fact, you can't really do it without being well engaged in the body. So it's interesting, because I think for me, this work is integral to being an effective communicator. And yet, as you say, it's in many circles, it's sort of overlooked or not even really thought about. And I think that's through the work that I'm doing and that we're doing, we really want to just give people a greater awareness of what they're communicating with their bodies as well. Because, body language, we see bodies before we hear voices or the content of what's being said. So you have to know what you're broadcasting with your body before you've even begun speaking.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for the practical examples and tips that people can do. So it sounds like with the body warm up, that's the kind of thing you might do in the bathroom, the restrooms, in private before you go on stage, for example. And I'm curious, is it different from when somebody's doing a virtual presentation or a virtual meeting? Should they warm up in a different way, do you think?
I think the same principles apply, actually. In fact, even more so, there's a sense with virtual meetings and encounters that it's more relaxed in a sense, and that's true to one extent, but don't rest on your laurels, I think is the message. So no, I would say the same principles still apply. You can still do that breathing exercise, do the spinal roll downs. I've done them before in bathrooms, before an audition, or before speaking in public. So, and it really helps ground and center, which I think is really important. And again, comes back to this, I'm a confident communicator. One other helpful tip is to just be really aware of your feet and what your feet are doing, and having your feet planted solidly connected to the earth, even if they already are, but just having a real sense of that to ground you is really important. And the same, that applies whether you're in a virtual Zoom conversation or on a stage somewhere.
Interesting. I've just moved my feet.
Right? Exactly.
I just moved my feet. I was very aware my feet were rested on my chair, but I've now moved them onto the ground.
Yes.
So no, it's a good point.
That's a perfect example. This work is so much just about awareness and having awareness of yourself. And we all do it. I've got loads of tics, and they're fine. But this work is just about giving us an awareness so that we have a choice. Because if we're not aware, we don't have a choice. And that's the important thing from my perspective.
That's brilliant. And I want to go back to something you said earlier, because these warm-up tips are amazing. And then you said something very interesting. You talked about what your body language is broadcasting. And I thought that was fascinating, because I know that when I'm working with clients, for sure, we're working on messaging and what to say, but I'm very, very interested in also making sure that people are aware of what's going on with their body. But I'd love to get your perspective on this. So, what is it we need to be aware of with what our body language is broadcasting? How do you help people to think about what they do with their hands, how they stand or sit, or what they're doing with their bodies?
Absolutely. Well, so much of this work is through observing yourself. So with the training that I do, we often involve cameras. So you'll actually be filmed on camera, because that's the best way. We can give a tip until we're blue in the face, but it's not until you see yourself on camera doing the thing that the message really lands. So absolutely, body language. I know that it's been disputed, but there was this expert in body language who said that 55% of what we communicate is non-verbal. I know that that's sort of been taken out of context, and we can't put an exact figure, but basically it suggests that before you've even opened your mouth, people have made up their minds about the majority of what you've already broadcast and signaled. So the body language and what we're conveying with our bodies is so important to be aware of. So we would look at, for example, things like how you're sitting, posture. Because if I was sitting here, I don't know if you can see that, but if I'm sitting here sort of slightly hunched and a bit cowed, that is a very different signal to you than someone who's sort of sitting like this. And equally, it's giving a different message to me. I'm sort of telling myself, oh, I am uncomfortable in this space, and I am slightly protective. So we would want to, if we're in doing some public speaking work, get the body nice and open, nice and relaxed. Any sort of little tics, perhaps there. Personally, I'm a real gesticulator. I'm always using my hands. But I think to have an awareness of how much you do that, and some people sit, arms crossed. What's that? Just being very aware of what these things are signaling to the person that you're speaking to, or the people that you're speaking to. And would you want to be the recipient of that kind of energy? I think is a helpful thing to consider and to bear in mind. So again, it all comes down to awareness. Even if you just practiced, perhaps you do have a presentation coming up, perhaps setting you can film yourself really easily on your phone and just watch it back, and maybe even share it with somebody else, or you could get a professional involved to give you some feedback, so that you've just got that outside eye. I think is really helpful.
I love that. And I absolutely agree. Filming yourself is fantastic. And I think, it is interesting how the thing you just said there about what you project compared to also how you feel, how your body language actually influences that is so interesting, right?
It's really interesting. Yeah. And I can remember many times when, and this was a long time ago, before any actor training or journalism, I used to be a swimming teacher. And I would get really nervous. This is sort of in my student days. I would get really nervous beforehand. But there was something about when I just got going, the nerves just went, and I sort of was able to follow. It was almost muscle memory, I guess, in the body, because the body sort of took over, and I'm a confident teacher, even if inside I'm feeling a bit wobbly. It's that, I don't know about this fake it till you make it, but there's something that you can use the body. If you have a confident stance, it will support and help you. to project that confidence.
Absolutely. And I love that. I think that's a really interesting way as well to help with the whole confidence mindset. There are things we can say to ourselves, and then we can signal it through our bodies as well, right? From what you're saying.
Absolutely. There's that sort of power stance that people do with the hands on their hips, and it's all that work, I think, just to like give yourself as much support as you can, I think, both, as you say, mentally, how you're speaking to yourself, but also this body gives you a huge feedback system as well.
Excellent. And I'm really kind of curious because obviously we have listeners who are based all over the world listening to this. And I know yourself that you've lived in France and worked in France as well as in the UK. So is body language cultural? Are there sort of subtle differences that happen between cultures that you noticed?
That is a great question. I think that body language is pretty universal. There are probably, of course, like cultural variations and nuances. But I think, ultimately, wherever you are in the world, we're all human and we all read bodies and one another. So regardless of the language, well, we're talking about body language rather than linguistic language. So I think we can all see, well, most of us anyway, would be aware of someone who has a posture that is indicating I'm fearful, I'm protective, I'm guarded. We read that, even if we're not aware that we're reading it, we are. And equally, the opposite is also true, because another important point is you don't want to overcompensate and sort of push too much and be too, I'm not nervous at all. Like that's sort of the other end of the spectrum. So it's this ability to be able to be at ease and comfortable in your own skin. And really, I feel like that translates by and large in any culture, because it has the same effect on us. It doesn't matter if you're from Japan or America or Papua New Guinea. The way that you hold your body will signal the same message to you.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that we would read it in the same way.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the only thing that I was just wondering, and I just, one of the things that I've sort of sometimes hear about is that perhaps the level, the volume of body language, so how expressive somebody might be, so how many, hand gestures they use, or how expansive they are with their body language. Maybe there is just some shifts there, or even maybe, I've come back from a recent trip to Italy, and I was just thinking, actually, in Italy, there are maybe some very specific hand gestures that have specific meaning, but that's not so much in public speaking, probably just more in everyday communication. But yes, I understand what you mean. I loved your point about, at the end of the day, we are all human. We are all interpreting all the time and decoding, our body language. So I love that. So thank you. Really interesting points.
Thank you. And I completely agree. You're right. There are these nuances and it's just, I don't want to make broad brush strokes and stereotypes, but yes, Italians gesticulate a lot and are very communicative in that way. Whereas I feel like us Brits, we are a bit more reserved, but I think like the core is the same. There are these subtleties and these nuances around it. When I was working in France, it was really interesting. Some lovely French colleagues. I remember someone put up on the wall this funny sort of poster that said what English people say and what they actually mean. Because of I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but yes, the British tendency to to talk around a subject and sort of say, oh, that's really interesting, when we know that means probably not going to take that any further. But someone who doesn't know that thinks, oh, great, they thought that was really interesting. And that was a real education for me, because it was like my culture being mirrored back to me. And I thought, oh gosh, we do that actually. And why can't we speak in a more direct and a more frank way, which at first I found quite sort of confronting, because we're used to sort of dancing around topics a bit more. So definitely those, I think, yes, that really comes out in language. Whereas the body language, I feel, is more or less the same. But as you say, there's a spectrum that we all work to.
Amazing. And yes, I often find that by learning about other cultures, we learn so much about our own cultural influences and what shapes us. I think that's a really very valid point. Now, I wanted to move into a slightly different point, which is I know that you have a lot of experience as a TV broadcast journalist. And one of the areas that I sometimes get asked about is either making videos or being interviewed, perhaps by journalists, or even kind of going on lives, being interviewed on a channel. And I know that's something that people somehow, with the camera, suddenly that changes everything. So they might be okay on presentations, they might be okay when it comes to public speaking, but suddenly there is a camera there and everything changes. So how can you help people in this space? Like, what are the ideas that you help people when they suddenly get frozen by the camera?
Okay, so the principles that we've already spoken about still very much apply in terms of the body and the breath and the voice, because that all comes down to managing your state, whether you've got the lights on you or you're being interviewed or you're on stage or on a Zoom call. When it comes to, yes, television and lights and journalists, it's the same things, but just everything is heightened. The stakes are higher. And some of the training that we do involves big screens and big lights because we want to put you in that really uncomfortable space as the training ground. It's that sort of, what do they say, train hard and fight easy. So you're used to that setting. On a practical note, I would say if it was a TV interview, for example, I would try and consider that you are just having a conversation. Okay, you've got all this paraphernalia around you, but ultimately, again, it comes down to you're a human talking to another human. Try to keep that sense in mind. And the same principles in terms of using the breath. You've got that skill now, that awareness, and you're aware of your body language, have your feet nice and grounded. All of these things will reinforce the message to yourself that you are safe and that you can communicate in this dynamic. And I would say, as much as possible, try and ignore everything else that's going on around you in terms of the lights and come back to that core sense of who you are. You're there to deliver a message, whatever that might be about, to another human, from one human to another. And the more that you can stick in that headspace, I think you'll help yourself rather than to get carried away of, oh gosh, I'm speaking to thousands of people and that's unhelpful.
What a brilliant mindset and approach, though. I mean, speaking again, human to human, ultimately, that's what it's got to be about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just the context varies. And of course, we have to shift and adapt. But the same principles are there. Yeah, you're a human talking to another human. And that's what will make people listen to you as well, because we want to listen to other humans. We don't want to talk, we don't take in robotic messages or again, if the body language is so sort of apparent, we're not going to hear the message because we're just going to see the body language. So as much as possible, again, it comes back to this calm state, grounded state. I'm a human, you're a human. We're just having a conversation with slightly imposed parameters.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love that. And thank you. I think that is very, very helpful. And hopefully will also help people who are listening today. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
So I am always very curious because, we're always on a learning journey. We're always kind of learning new things. I know I am. I'm sure you are as well. So what is something that you've learned recently about communication?
So I don't know if you've heard of, it's a sort of a practice, it's called non-violent communication, or NVC.
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Right. So a friend of mine introduced me to it last year. and they run these courses, and she said, "Oh, it's brilliant, Helen. It's really helped my communication." So I did one of these courses, and it's really good. It was set up by this chap called Marshall Rosenberg in the 60s, I believe. And there's lots of elements to it, but it's a lot about empathy and listening. And one of the key takeaways that I took from this course was, if you're having a difficult conversation with someone, or there's a conflict, basically, our natural tendencies are to sort of dig our heels into our position, and the other person digs their heels in, and we get more and more opposed. And one of the things that came up on this NVC course that I did was that actually, when you get into that sort of space, something that's really helpful is to repeat back what the person has said, but in slightly different language. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I could be, you're really cross with me, Victoria, because I have finished all your coffee in your house and there's no coffee left and you're really cross. And so rather than say, well, I've finished all the coffee because you finished all my tea, and getting more and more opposed, the one helpful trick is to actually say, so Victoria, am I right in understanding that you're angry because I finished your coffee and that makes you feel disrespected? And it's just a fantastic way, because what happens invariably is that the other person then feels seen, listened to, and validated, and then says, yes, actually, I did feel disrespected when you did that. And then I could come back with, I can understand how feeling disrespected would make you feel like I don't care about you, but actually I do care about you. And it's a way of reconnecting with the person in a situation that feels where you're both in sort of quite polarized positions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting, the language approach, actually, because it's, as you say, I can hear that it's about building the bridge and the empathy, and rather than creating more friction and tension in the conversation. Fantastic. Wow, that sounds amazing. I definitely will have to find out more about that. So thank you for that tip and idea. And sounds like it was a really great course that you did as well with that.
Amazing. Yeah, and it actually works. I have actually used it, and it really did work. So yeah, excellent. I recommend looking into that.
Yeah. Amazing. So Helen, thank you so much for coming today. It's been absolutely fantastic conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, and there's so much more I would have loved to talk to you about. But I'm very conscious we're probably coming towards the end of today's episode. But I would love for you to share, if people are really interested in exploring this further, so understanding more about how to use their bodies well, their breath, their voice, and want to find out more about what you do, what is the best way for them to be in touch with you?
Great, yes. So I am the co-founder of a company called Sequentially that I run with my colleague and broadcast journalist Claire Whitaker. And together we run media training, holistic media training. So we cover all the elements of speaking with journalists, being on camera, that side of things, how to deal with journalists in the media, but we blend it with our approach of making people really aware of the body, the breath, and the voice, running through lots of exercises, really integrating that work. And we work with groups, we've worked with CEOs, we've worked with children's book illustrators, TV reporters. So the same principles apply throughout. And yet we work with individuals and with groups. So we'd be very, very happy to help and support anyone who'd like to learn more about this. The company is called Sequentially, and our website is sequentially.co.uk.
Fantastic. Well, I will make sure we put the link in the show notes. And yeah, for sure, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today's show, on the episode. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh.
And yes, I look forward to seeing everybody next time on the show. See you next time.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.